So this is part 2 of our end of year wrap up discussion video. If you haven't already, please check out part 1, it's already up on the channel, which focuses on the heavyweight divisions, where the man sitting to my right, Adam Smith, comes up with some outrageous opinions on the heavyweight division, including a suggestion that Tony Bellew may actually have a size advantage against David Haye. We'll move very swiftly on from that, and we'll move on to discussing some of the other divisions in boxing. And there's only one place that we can start for this video. Will you be spending your children's inheritance buying a Chris Eubank Jr. versus Ronaldo Quinlan pay-per-view for the IBO Super Middleweight World title at a leisure centre?
I'd rather use that money in Starbucks and then say keep the change than pay for that fight. There is no logic at all to that fight. There is no logic.
Why has this happened?
I have no idea. I don't know how they have managed to talk themselves into this position of fighting for the IBO title
At Super Middleweight.
At Super Middleweight on ITV pay-per-view.
There's two schools of thought on this. School of thought number 1 is that the pay-per-view numbers could be ridiculous, embarrassing. And this was my first thought when this was made. I thought, Jesus, they're going to do 1,000 pay-per-view buys and it's going to completely spoil their credibility in the market. You know, you've got Anthony Joshua, Carl Frost, these guys are established pay-per-view stars. We know how many they're selling on Sky. The Eubanks are going to be an absolute laughing stock if they go on ITV pay-per-view and do 500 pay-per-view buys. That was my first school of thought. My concern now, and I do think it's a concern because I think it's bad for boxing in the long run, is that with all the publicity around the Eubanks at present, combined with ITV's platform and the promotion that ITV will provide, that they could actually do rather well. And I don't expect they're going to do 500,000 pay-per-view buys, but the more I think about it, the more I'm convinced that the event could be a success. Because if you think about it, it's at a leisure centre. It's not going to cost a lot of money to put on. Quinlan, I can't imagine, has been the most expensive opponent to bring over. You know, I can't imagine you need megabucks to bring him over to fight. So if they do 100,000 pay-per-view buys at 20 quid a go, potentially that's quite a profitable night for the Eubanks, both senior and junior. And the more I think about it, the more I'm concerned that this could actually become a successful model. I think enough people will buy it.
I think the people that buy it will be the sort of Chris Eubank casual fans, the ones that watched a video of him hitting the stationary bag, which you've mentioned a couple of times in your previous videos, and say that the man could break down a brick wall and stuff like that. Those are the people that will buy it. And on those sort of ideas that you were saying, it could be a monetary success. It depends on what they base it on. If you're talking about paychecks, and yeah, Chris Eubank Jr. is probably going to call it a success. If you base it on pay-per-view buys, like most people seem to base pay-per-views, I just cannot see it being a success. I cannot.
Do you not think the platform that is ITV can promote and bring in enough casual viewers? I mean, we know when Carl Frampton's fought on ITV before, it's done mega numbers, albeit that was free to air.
Yeah. It was free to air, and it was a big event in and of itself. I mean, didn't they not construct their own temporary stadium for about 16,000 seats, I think?
Yeah, but I mean, Eubank, I'm not saying Eubank's a bigger name than Frampton in boxing, but Eubank is clearly a bigger name than Frampton in terms of public celebrity.
Perhaps, but I think combining... Would Carl Frampton have done 2 million views if he was pay-per-view? No.
No. But this is the thing, if you think about it, when Eddie Hearn puts on a pay-per-view, he's paying Charles Martin £3 million to come over. He's putting down Wembley Stadium and renting that out for a night. The Eubanks aren't actually doing that, are they?
No.
They are renting out a little leisure centre. They're bringing an opponent no one's heard of, and they're having an undercard that presumably no one's
interested in.
Yeah. So what I'm getting at is they actually probably don't have to do anything like the numbers that an Anthony Joshua or a Carl Frost pay-per-view has to do. And what my concern is that this could actually be a success on 75,000 buys.
The money could be a success, but what we've seen before, when bad pay-per-views happen, there's negative publicity. I mean, after Hay Audley, pay-per-view was thrown out.
Yeah, I don't think it will be as one-sided as that, because this is at super
I'm
middleweight.
not saying... I'm not talking about the fight. I'm talking about the disappointment and outrage.
But will it be... I'm not sure there will be... This is where I think you're wrong. Because the person who's buying that pay-per-view isn't buying it thinking it's going to be a cracking fight. They're buying it because they're a Chris Eubank Jr. fan. And what they're going to want to see is Eubank doing what he does, putting those punches together, being the guy in the ring that they know, and all the drama that surrounds him. And I think they'll get that. I don't think these guys are paying the pay-per-view to tune in and watch a real technical boxing match of two elite competitors. And I also think Eubank is a guy who overwhelms opponents at 160, and I think his size and strength advantage is the key factors. The difference between 160 and 168 is quite different. I don't believe Eubank is going to be as effective at 168. Now, granted, he's probably a level above this guy, who I still haven't seen fight, by the way. But it may not necessarily actually be a bad fight. It's just a crazy fight to pay pay-per-view for.
Can you imagine if Eubank Jr. gets chinned? What will happen?
I just can't. I don't know what Eubank Sr. would say.
No.
I don't know. Do you think there's a lot of rumours about him fighting George Groves in future? Do you think that Eubank will... I mean, Eubank himself has said he's happy to fight at 160 or 168. Depends where the opponents are. Do you have an opinion as to where he'll be best suited?
I think 160 would be more preferable to him. I think 160 is also where he'll make his most money, which seems to be quite a big motivator for him. The George Groves fight...
Why do you think 160 is where he'll make his most money?
The names are there. There's the Billy Joe Saunders rematch, if and when.
Yeah.
If a Gennady Golovkin fight ever happens, which seems to get less and less likely with every passing second,
Yeah.
that's obviously a big fight, especially if it comes over here. He's not really mentioned Canelo at all, but Canelo's obviously going down a different line now, at the moment. But those are the money fights. Those are the money fights in boxing if you're not a heavyweight, as well.
Don't you think Eubank Groves, Eubank Degale...
They do fine. They would do fine, I think. But Eubank versus Gennady Golovkin or Eubank versus Billy Joe will do very well on British pay-per-view. Eubank versus Degale might do well on British pay-per-view. I saw Degale saying his next fight, if he comes home, he'll sell out the Emirates. The Emirates Stadium where Arsenal play. I don't see that.
Seeing as you brought up Degale, let's touch on him briefly. Degale versus Badou Jack. How do you see that fight going?
I edge towards Degale, but I almost always edge towards Degale when he goes into a fight.
Yeah.
In truth, it's not even that I'm overly. I have no ill will to Badou Jack. I actually think he's a fine boxer, but Degale on form is a very good thing. Indeed, you saw that in the early rounds against Andre Durrell as well, where he just looked spectacular, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm inclined to think Degale's got a slightly higher upside. And what do you make of the new Frank Warren BT Sports Box Mason deal?
Oh, where do we begin on that one? That's a whole video in and of itself. I don't have numbers in terms of figures off the top of my head, so I can't say anything with certainty or fact. But I question how much of a competition this is really going to be to Sky.
Well, it's going to be 30 shows a year, so Frank's going to be putting on more than one show every fortnight.
Yeah, well, that leads to its own problems. That leads to a watering down.
Yeah.
That's pretty much undeniable.
Because he doesn't appear at the minute to have the stable for that.
I don't know how many homes BT Sport is in, but I do know that the numbers for the Champions League in football have dropped. And that is the biggest continental competition since it's moved off ITV to BT Sport.
I believe, and I don't know the specifics, that BT Sport is now going to all customers of EE, like the mobile phone.
Oh,
network.
really?
So Frank seems pretty confident. I'm sure I don't know if someone will comment, but it seems that more people will actually have access to it than Sky.
As a freebie? Or would you have to pay for it?
I don't know. I mean, all the Box Nation customers will get access to the shows. I mean, we've already seen Josh Warrington leave Matchroom.
Yeah.
We've seen Tyrone Nurse sign with Frank. I mean, Josh Warrington's the kind of guy who they'd maybe get out 3 or 4 times as a headline event.
Yeah.
Tyrone Nurse, fight I rate very highly. Whether he's a headliner, I don't know. Obviously, Huey Fury, he's going to be a headliner. Liam Smith's a headliner. Liam Williams is a headliner. Terry Flanagan's a headliner. Billy Joe Saunders is probably their biggest fighter. Then you've got the likes in the wings coming up of Bradley Skeet. You've got the likes of Liam Walsh fighting for a world title. I think we should go to that actually. He's fighting for a world title at York Hall, I believe.
Is he?
I might have got that wrong, but I believe so. Then you've got prospects coming through like Anthony Yard. He signed Chris Eubank's other son. He signed Nigel Benn's other son. You know, what do you make of that stable?
It's more prospect than anything else, in my opinion. The biggest 2 names I'd say would be Billy Joe Saunders, who just went life or death.
Yeah.
And Flanagan. And Flanagan is going in, if his next fight is Daijo, that is a hard fight for him.
But what about, I mean, Huey Fury is not a mega name right now, but if he is legit mandatory for Joseph Parker, which he appears to be, and I think he'll beat Parker, then you've got Frank having a world champion.
We'll see where that goes. Well, it's a very generic statement, we'll see where it goes, but do I envisage... I personally, even if the BT Sport thing works, I think we'll end up in a sort of golden boy, top-ranked Cold War between the 2 different TV platforms here as well. I mean, everyone.
Do you think it's good for boxing?
If it were, it will be good for the boxers. It will be tricky if it's really restricting on viewing numbers for people. It's like everyone wanted to see Crawler versus Flanagan when they both had titles.
Yeah.
It was never really gonna happen.
Yeah.
And that does seem to be a sort of staple of this a big unification craze across the 2 promoters. I don't see it being likely in many instances, apart from a big Stadium Anthony Joshua fight where everyone gets minted.
Yeah, and I guess with Frank now having to do 30 shows for his broadcasters, it's going to be a lot more pressure on Frank.
Well, it might be good for his prospects. I can't remember. Showtime is it Showtime Challengers or Showtime Extreme in the States has a which is essentially just for the prospects to start building their names and stuff.
Yeah.
That could work, and that would be very beneficial to some people. It just depends if the viewing figures are there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think of the 30 shows, 10 are going to be small hall on Box Nation, 20 are going to be slightly bigger on BT Sports. So it'll be interesting. A lot of Frank's fighters, you know, the Skeets of this world, the Walshes of this world, the Huey Furies, those sort of guys, the Flanagans, they're not what have traditionally been known as highly marketable fighters. No. They're more boxers who appeal to the purist, I think. They're technicians, they're amateur standouts, they're jabbers and movers. I wonder how those guys' styles are going to come across to the BT Sports viewer. I wonder if they're going to generate the same interests, you know. I think that's a...
Who are the names, the sort of most publicly known names in British boxing at the moment? Anthony Joshua.
I would say Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, David Haye, Chris Eubank Jr. Maybe you'd have to throw in Dillian White now, I don't know.
Maybe Kell Brook.
Kell Brook, yeah.
Not people known for knockouts flash.
I'm trying to think who else you'd throw. I mean, Khan, obviously. Very, very big name. You know, it's crazy, but someone like Conor Benn would be up there. You know, that's
the point is, none of them were exactly Erislandi Lara type fighters.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. It really is true. And historically, you look at it, I mean, Eggington fought Skeet. Skeet won very nicely. Skeet really...
Eggington's headlining Sky Sports bills.
Exactly. what has Skeet been able to achieve? I know he's had a few fights, but what has he actually achieved in terms of forwarding his career? You know, Liam was, for me, one of the most brilliant talents in the sport in Britain. How many people have even seen him fight? So I'm hoping that kind of dynamic changes with this deal. You know, I also think there's been fighters that Frank's had who've really remained under the radar. I mean, the two examples I give a lot, and they're not great fighters, but Prince Patel and Romeo, they are crazily marketable fighters. You know, maybe not likeable, but they're crazily marketable. If they were on Sky, you'd see them in that 4-round slot before the main event. You know, we haven't really seen Frank have the platform to build these fighters yet. I think that could change with the 30 show a year thing. I think it could be a good time to be a prospect. You know, Eddie Hearn's built a pretty large stable, and that's meant that some of the guys have struggled to get regular.
Yeah.
You know, you think of guys like Rocky Fielding, Isaac Chamberlain, John O'Carroll. Think of those sort of guys. They're lower down the pecking order with the Hearns. Lots of rumours that Amir Khan versus Kell Brook has been made. Now, earlier today, you told me you favoured Amir Khan in that matchup, which was a surprise to me because...
I think, let me quantify that slightly. If the Amir Khan on when his early rounds against Maidana and the full fight against Devon Alexander, pretty much perfect, in my opinion. Lightning fast, in, out, can't touch him. Looks fantastic. He hasn't fought like that since the Devon Alexander fight. Granted, he barely fought since the Devon Alexander fight. Kell Brook has just come off not a bad knockout in the sense of the damage done to him, rather than the dishonour of the knockout. But he is not a slickster. And I think if Amir Khan fights by essentially hit and run, jab, jab, right hand, get out of there, and which he can do for 36 minutes, it doesn't seem to be something he's overly inclined to do, then he should win.
Amir Khan is quite an easy guy to walk down. I mean, you look at the success Chris Algieri had against him. I know Canelo is obviously a different level to Chris Algieri, but you look at the way Canelo walked him down. I mean, for me, Khan...
It did take 6 rounds for Canelo to really walk him down. So.
Well, you say that, and you're possibly right, but Khan comes out, puts on a dominant performance for the first round, wins the second round. Third round, Canelo comes into the fight. It's competitive. It doesn't matter how you score it. You know, Canelo clearly has a better round. It's heating up. As the fight's going on, it's getting more and more competitive. And then...
Bang.
My question is, Khan, he's not got a good chin. He's also not got a good defence. He is not going to fight a fight against a guy as elite as Kell Brook without getting caught at some point in this fight. And I just don't know. I don't think he's going to live with the power of Kell Brook. And I'm not saying Kell Brook is some massive puncher.
Kell Brook is not Marcus Maidana. And if Amir Khan fights like he does against Marcus Maidana, pretty much including that 10th round when he was almost out on his feet, because I don't think Kell Brook punches anywhere near as hard as Marcus Maidana does. Kell
Brook's a lot more technically capable than Marcus Maidana. He's a lot more clinical. You know, the Maidana fight's a bit, to be honest, I don't really want to go into that anyway, it's a bit of a red herring. We're talking about a fight when, it must be nearly 10 years ago now, both at different weight classes, that's not relevant form to this matchup. What I'm getting at is you're going to have Amir Khan boxing on the back foot, picking up early rounds, and I just think you're going to have Kell walking him down, and when he catches him, Amir just doesn't have it at that sort of time.
We'll see. I admire Kell Brook a lot, and I think he is a good fighter. But he's almost always struck me, I'm afraid, as a slightly limited fighter. And, Lord Khan's limited in his own ways. But I think Khan has that rare gift of hand speed and footwork. Maybe he doesn't have the best chin, but he has that rare combination of the other two that will make it harder for Kell.
But I like Amir Khan. I'm a fan of Amir Khan.
One thing I will say is the rings he's been fighting in America seem to be a lot bigger than the rings I've seen in Matchroom cards.
But for me, the problem is that Amir Khan, you said he doesn't have the best chin. I think we've now got to say it as it really is. In terms of elite boxing, in terms of the top boxers out there, Amir Khan has a terrible chin. Like, I'm not saying Amir Khan's got a worse chin than the man in the street, but if you look at the top tier of boxers, Amir Khan has a terrible, terrible chin. And he's got all the advantages. You're right. He's probably faster than Kell Brook. He probably throws better combinations. He may have a better punch variety. I don't think he hits as hard. But all of that in boxing, I mean, he could be 10 rounds up, and then he's going to get caught. And that chin is just not going to live with it, I don't think. I don't think Amir Khan is slick enough defensively to go 12 rounds with Kell Brook. Just look at the way Chris Algieri walked him down. You know, look at the guys who've given him trouble in the past.
It'll be Amir Khan's toughest, outside of Canelo, Amir Khan's toughest fight in a while. I think it will be equally, if not much more tough for Kell Brook, though, than Sean Porter.
I disagree. I think, to be honest, it's quite easy work for Kell Brook.
We'll see.
We will see. Okay, let's change the pace. Let's talk about some of the big fights in world boxing at present, and we'll just stick for like 1 or 2 minutes on each of these.
Sure.
A lot of rumours about Keith Thurman, Danny Garcia.
Yep.
Even a proposed date in the calendar. Who do you think was that fight?
Close fight, good fight, interesting fight. Not entirely sure, in truth. Not entirely sure. Difficult one to make a prediction on, in my opinion.
If I put a gun to your head now and said pick a man, who would you be picking?
Thurman.
Thurman. Why?
Better quality of opposition in recent years. The Sean Porter fight is better than a lot of Danny Garcia's last fights.
Jacobs versus
Gennady
Golovkin.
Quite easily.
Knockout?
Probably.
Talk about Alexander Usyk.
Brilliant fighter. Hard division to get household name in. Hard division. Would beat Tony Bellew. I don't think there's much discussion about that. I've gone blank on the other cruiserweight champions all of a sudden. But will be the king of that division, in my opinion.
Kovalev versus Ward. How keen are you for a rematch?
Quite keen. I had Kovalev ahead. Think if nothing, it depends. It's one of these things. Big fights don't necessarily always have to have a rematch, but given how it ended, it should have a rematch.
Do you think? I mean, my personal perspective is that Ward struggled with Kovalev early on, made adjustments, and then started to pick up later rounds. I think most people would agree with that, whether they had Kovalev winning or Ward winning.
Yeah.
With Ward being, one of the classiest boxers you're likely to see, do you not think that experience over 12 rounds would stand him in very good stead for a rematch?
Yes, probably it would.
I'd make him more of a favourite for a rematch than the first one.
Me too.
How do you rate Ward as an all-time great?
His inactivity has really hurt his listing on an all-time great list, unfortunately. That Super 6 run, and then Chad Dawson was...
I think Kovalev is arguably his best win.
Yeah, I agree.
I think
I agree. I agree totally with that. But he was on a great run that ended just due to promotional issues.
I think Ward is one of the most underrated fighters. I think if I look at him size-wise, I think he's more of a super middleweight. I think he's gone and wiped out, the Froches, the Keslers, those sort of guys. He's beat Chad Dawson, which I actually still view as a respectable win, despite the fact that there were factors there. And he's gone out and he's beaten Sergei Kovalev, who for me was pound for pound number 3 prior to that fight. I've got Andre Ward as a definite pound for pound number 1. His style isn't marketable. He doesn't carry immense power. He may not be the most engaging character outside of the ring, but this is a guy with real class.
He's my number 3 at the moment, pound for pound.
Who could you have above Andre Ward?
One is pure fanboying, which is Gennady Golovkin.
Above Andre Ward?
Yeah.
What are Golovkin's 3 biggest wins?
Excuse me. In any particular order?
Yeah, 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
What's his biggest win?
Lemieux?
So, a man whose best win is David Lemieux.
I just want to finish this. Ward is beautiful boxer. Agreed. Stunningly skillful.
That's not my point.
I think it's very hard to be the best pound for pound boxer in the world when you're fighting very rarely.
I think it's very hard to be the best pound for pound boxer in the world when your best win is David Lemieux.
At least you're active. At least you're active and showing your skill and your greatness.
Who's his second best win?
I don't know.
This is terrible.
My number one is Lomachenko.
Who's his best win?
Walters.
Who's his second best win?
Did he beat Gary Russell Jr.?
Yeah. I mean, this is for me.
I told you, we've argued on this format many times before about Gennady Golovkin. I am an unashamed fanboy.
You can be a fanboy of his. You can think would beat every fighter. You can say he'd beat Andre Ward, but to say that you place him above Andre Ward when his best win is David Lemieux is terrible.
If you scale them up, which is as I understand pound for pound, if you scale someone up or scale someone down, and then put them in with someone on the pound for pound list and they win, they'd be the number one. They'd be above them.
I think you've got to rank it based on resume. And I think based on resume, the only guy you can make a real argument to beat Andre Ward is Manny Pacquiao.
Manny Pacquiao?
Yeah.
Ooh. I'm the one making outlandish claims.
I don't think that's that outlandish. Manny Pacquiao's been in the top of the pound for pound list for a decade.
It's not pound. I wouldn't. I think that if we're going on skill level, well, repeat what you said, hang on, repeat what you said just now. About pound for pound, repeat it.
I don't know what you mean.
What you just said before Manny Pacquiao, the bit about Manny Pacquiao, the bit you said before, just say that.
That you've picked someone with their best win.
No, for God's sake. It doesn't matter. If we're going on resume, that was it, resume.
Yeah.
And we got Andre Ward's fight, stadium, opponent, stadium, ticket sales, and date of fight. The gap between those fights based on date of fight be big. Agree or disagree?
Agree.
And it's difficult for me to say that you were the best fighter in the world, no one else can touch you, when you're fighting once or twice a year.
Well, it's even more difficult to say you're the best fighter in the world if you've best one is David Lemieux.
Yeah, but if you scaled up Gennady Golovkin fairly to super middleweight, or to maybe not to light heavyweight, as you say, Andre was probably a super middleweight, and you scaled them up, my money would still be on Golovkin.
The point is, if you make outlandish arguments like this, where does it end? Why is Anthony Joshua not the pound for pound number one? I mean, I know he's beaten Eric Molina, but you could say that if you scaled him down, it's so easy. It's much easier to look good against the Lemieux of this world. Look, Lemieux's a very good fighter, by the way, but he's not a pound for pound number one fighter. You know, if Andre Ward was fighting, David Lemieux, Martin Murray, Matthew Macklin, don't rule out him looking a lot better than he's looked because he's been fighting Sergey Kovalev.
We're also not factoring the fact that, in my mind, and to a lot of people's mind, Ward lost. And had Ward lost, or being called a loss, then Kovalev would be above him.
But he didn't lose. He won.
Yeah, well,
And this is how boxing, unfortunately, goes. I mean, there's so many fights in history, where you have to side with the winner in terms of how you rank things. Okay. I'm just trying to think if there's any other major topics.
Frampton, Santa Cruz.
Yeah, Frampton, Santa Cruz. Be brief. Give me a minute on that.
First fight was fantastic. Big Carl Frampton fan. Big Leo Santa Cruz fan. Outside of New York will make it a lot more interesting. Wouldn't be overly surprised if Santa Cruz does a lot better this time, at least in terms of judges, the scorecards. Would like Frampton to win.
I think Frampton will win that. I think he's worked Santa Cruz out, and I don't see that Santa Cruz has the versatility to offer something different. Crawler Linares, rematch.
Linares.
Do you think you saw what you need to see?
Like Anthony Crawler, Linares is just fantastic.
Nathan Cleverly versus Jürgen Bremer. Who are you picking in a rematch?
Cleverly.
Cleverly? Interesting. Didn't expect you to say that.
Cleverly, yeah.
Why?
We've seen Cleverly live, and Grant, again, was it Krasinski?
Yeah.
and he never got out of second gear. But the Cleverly that shows up against... The Cleverly that does well against Andre Fonfara in that fight. We'll see.
Final question. Billy Joe Saunders versus Canelo. If it were to happen at 160, who wins?
Canelo.
Why?
Late knockout.
I'm picking Billy Joe Saunders to edge it on points and to get robbed. We've got to roll, guys. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please take the time to hit the thumbs up button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, The Boxing Gossip. Leave your comments below. Perhaps you want to comment on some of the ludicrous statements that have been made here in the last half an hour. Perhaps you want to provide some fashion advice on that shirt. But yeah, leave your comments. Let us know your feedback. Looking forward to boxing ahead in 2017. And as always, thanks for watching, and hope everyone's had a good new year. Cheers, guys.